The Trump today announced his reciprocal tariffs. I think it was a particularly smart tariff strategy that he's embracing. So it's a twofold strategy. First, it's reciprocal. So if you don't impose tariffs, Trump doesn't impose tariffs. If you don't impose or other non-tariff barriers that a lot of people impose, because look, if you're going to screw with us and making it difficult for us to engage in free exchange with your customers, why should we give you free access to our customers? Trump just sees that as stupid. The second reason is for national security and industrial policy. And this is a point Kevin Phillips has long advocated for, all the way back to the 1970s. In fact, I have one of those books around where Kevin Phillips was advancing an industrial policy in the 1970s. An industrial policy Germany would adopt, an industrial policy Japan would adopt, an industrial policy that ultimately China would adopt, but one that the United States would abandon to its economic detriment. And so he sees this as a national security issue as well, that as the pandemic revealed, when you depend on on imports for necessary medical supplies, necessary food, necessary housing supplies, necessary essential minerals, necessary things you need for your military capacity, you don't have a secure country. You can be extorted or blackmailed at any time by foreign nations. That's not a national security plan. And when Trump realizes that all essential goods we have to have at least the capacity to make those ourselves, whatever those are. And that means we have to have some footprint here in the U.S. We can't be 100% dependent on foreign nations for that. And that's recognized. That's a national security interest. Like people who just look at GDP and just look at the economy are in the tariff contest are ignoring the national security ramifications and implications of outshoring your essential goods and products. The other component, the reason why Trump supports industrial policy, is he wants there to be good jobs for American workers. And in particular, he wants those jobs to be the kind of jobs that can sustain families and communities. And here, as I've often talked about, the social cohesion component of economic planning. If all you do is look at your balance sheet and you don't put on that balance sheet the cost of destroying people's jobs and wages and livelihood, then you're not doing the balance sheet right. And if we look at that balance sheet and say, well, you know what? You're in Youngstown, Ohio. You can now get a product from China over at Walmart for $3.99. And if you were making it, it would be $9.99. Isn't that great? Even though now you have no home, you have no wages, you have no pension, you have no benefits, you have no home, you have no basic access to things that would give you a sense of pride and identity. Your family is falling apart. Your community is falling apart. But you can get it for $3.99, everybody. That's the problem. Because on that balance sheet should be the economic cost of destroying jobs, the economic cost of reducing wages, the economic cost of deindustrializing America. Because it's there, but your economists don't put it in the balance sheet because they don't care. Bottom line, I don't care. My favorite view of economists can be summed up in the movie Back to School with the one and only Rodney Dangerfield. And the nerdy economics professor is saying, we're going to make these widgets and here's how we're going to do it. And he's designing something that's fictional, that's only exists in an abstract world. And this is the point that Rodney Dangerfield's character is making, who's an actual businessman who understands the actual world of the real economy. And he points out all the things you would need to actually deal with in the real world for this proposed business plan. And the economics professor is very dismissive of him. And so then the economics professor says, where should we locate our plant? And Rodney Dangerfield says, Disneyland, because that's the fantasy world you're going to need to live in. That's my summation of my disagreement with economists. Indeed, throughout all of history, economists side with whichever way Wall Street money wants them to side with. So in the late 19th century, not a single self-respecting economist would oppose tariffs. They all supported them. Then all of a sudden they all oppose it a half century later. How does that happen? Did the economics profession suddenly change with new discoveries? No. Wall Street had a different agenda. Wall Street in the late 19th century is investing in America. By the mid-20th century, they want to invest overseas. So they get their economist lackeys to come out and say, good economic policy supports free trade. And the other illusion here is that there's such a thing as free trade. We've never had free trade. We never will have free trade. That's just not possible. True free trade occurs in an anarchistic system and economy without any government intervention at all, without any imposition whatsoever. Right? How can you have free trade when you have to make your goods with these regulatory restrictions and these labor obligations and these social impositions versus someone who's competing with you who doesn't have any of those, who can, let's say, bring in slave labor, who doesn't have to abide by any environmental regulations, safety regulations, or anything else. They're able to make that product cheaper by stealing from labor. They're able to make that product cheaper by making it less safe. So why should they have a competitive edge? And that's not a free market exchange. That's it's one set of burdens on your own employers and a different lower set of burdens on foreign employers. That doesn't make any sense to me. Trump's view is, in order to have access to U.S. customers, you should abide by the same standards as U.S. competitors, as their U.S. competitors do, or have the equal economic cost of a tariff imposed on you to equalize the playing field. He's not trying to shift it in favor of weak manufacturers. He's trying to just make it even. That's it, even. And he's trying to make it even in a way that is reciprocal. So he says, look, if you allow full fair access of our products to your customers and consumers, and you don't manipulate a competitive edge by simply having lower labor and environmental standards and safety standards, then no problem. Then what he wants is an equal playing field, true free trade. That's what Trump is seeking. He's not seeking an edge. He's not seeking, our manufacturers are so bad they have to have special protections. That's not what he's saying. He's saying there needs to be equal playing field. And he goes, right now there's not. And until there is, you foreign competitor I'm going to tariff you and tax you until it is an equal playing field. And why? Because he understands the national security interest of onshoring our essential goods and products in the areas of medicine, food, and housing, and military, but also critically and essentially understands the value to working class communities of good, high-paying jobs. Go back and watch the debate between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro on firing truckers. Ben Shapiro's making the argument, what if we could automate truck driving? Wouldn't that be great? Tucker Carlson says, no, it wouldn't. You're destroying one of the last good-paying jobs for working-class people in this country. Because why would you want to do that? Do you understand the knock-on effects, right? Find the economist who puts in their economic analysis the social impact of divorce, the social impact of fathers not being present, the economic impact of that. Because you can price that. There are ways in which you can price that. The price impact of increased drug use, the price impact of increased criminal justice cost to the system, the price impact of people who are just unproductive and drop out of society because they have no sense of pride and honor because the employment for pride and honor has gone and been stripped from them to give to Chinese slave laborers in the name of free trade. Also, my libertarian friends out there love talking about free trade. Do you believe in free trade and intellectual property? Are you for getting rid of all patent protection, all copyright protection, all trademark connection? Because if you're not, you're just a hypocritical fraud like 90% of libertarians. So property can have special protection, but labor can't? How does that work? This is why I've always been on the popular side of the tariff equation, not the snob side of the tariff equation. But it's also because the snob side is unrealistic about national security, fails to adequately price in the real economic harm and cost of unproductive communities and destroyed labor value of working class constituencies throughout this country. So I think Trump made the absolute right choice. And I think he's brilliantly going about it. I mean, he's not just unilaterally imposing tariffs. He's not just putting on protective tariffs. He's doing reciprocal tariffs. Make it a balanced, level playing field. But if you have an unlevel playing field, you're going to pay the price until it is a level playing field. That's all Trump is doing. That is actually promoting true free trade. Trump's not anti-free trade. He's anti the bogus neoliberal trade policy that allows global elites to find the cheapest labor and steal from workers in order to enrich themselves at the expense of our national security, our social cohesion, and our community. And I think Trump has done the right thing. Brilliant on him. Credit to him that he's done so. And I get people where people are concerned about how tariffs can go too far. They absolutely can't. But look at what Trump has done. It's reciprocal. It's completely conditional upon what you do and how much you level the playing field in your country to compete with our people. That's it. That's as good as that he is promoting more free trade than anyone else ever has by making sure the trade is actually free, which means it must be on an even playing field, not an uneven playing field. So credit to the president in that capacity. Tipped question: do you think the Wall Street crowd will deliberately sell off the market to get Trump to relax on the tariffs? They can try, but as Besant made clear today, as Trump made clear today, as others have made clear today, they do not consider the stock market the metric and the measurement for their economic success. They think I think the way Besant put it is, that's a problem for the Mag 7. He's referring to the Mag 7 stocks that are the entire basis of the stock market being up, frankly. Mostly a bunch of big tech companies that have been historically hostile with Trump. And his point was, we don't really care what happens to their stocks. We care about putting the economy on better footing. Because there's two issues Trump's addressing. One is the last half century, we have destroyed working class wages in industry and endangered our national security with trade policy. That's half of what Trump is fixing. The other half is Biden, during his 4 years, just created a bunch of government boondoggles to artificially inflate the economy in his hopes that it could get Harris over the crossing line, but did so at the expense of ridiculous amounts of government spending, debt, and boondoggling. And he's trying to fix that as well. What was likely going to occur is the stock market is likely to decline because it's way, way, way overvalued from almost any traditional metric, especially those big 7 stocks. And they made it clear. They said that might be bad for the Mag 7. It's not bad for MAGA. So that gives you an idea where they're at. Trump will not be blackmailed by the stock market. Not this time around.